After stream yesterday, I was able to collect my thoughts a little bit more on the Galakrond situation, and I think I have a better idea of what's going on with that. Basically, in short form, the evidence that people are citing to talk about what happened to Galakrond is really important to recognize that what is written in it, and I'll go over it like I said in the quest, but what's written in it is basically like, it expresses unsurety. Uncertainty is a better word. Uncertainty. And by that I mean that like by that I mean the Titan Keepers who were writing about Galakrond and talking about Galakrond, they did not understand fully what happened to Galakrond. And by that I mean like, remember how in the book that talks about it, there's a quest that can take you through where you can discover like what supposedly led to Galakrond's creation, right? And the book says like, yo, not sure how Yogg-Saron was able to corrupt the infusion pools, but we're finding, they claim there that they're finding lower traces of corruption already. I think that's very interesting, because they follow that up with saying, let me know how your investigation into how this occurred, how that goes. Like, how did this happen? Like, they're not exactly sure. Like, they think that the water is what contaminated Galakrond, but what does that tell you? Well, it should tell you that they knew that Galakrond was consuming the water. which means that Galakrond, more likely than not, was a Titan experiment. And see, what really happened was that when Galakrond fell, Galakrond's claw, one of his claws pierced Serenite, and that Serenite seemingly corrupted him with necromantic, like, death energy that led them to believe that he was corrupted by Yogg-Saron's water, but that's not what happened. See, it's a misunderstanding if what I believe is correct. They didn't know that. They assumed that it was the water because they had been giving it to him, but that's not really what corrupted Galakrond. When Galakrond died, his body, which was then going to, probably more quickly than a normal body, succumb to any form of necrosis or type of like necrotic energy like what he was exposed to. That's what they based it off of. Not that he had some type of a corruption reading prior to this. And what I think backs it up even more is Galakrond's appearance. He does not appear to be necrotic or rotting away or he's big and he's scary looking and he's kind of gross looking, sure, but he does not appear to be a necrotic dragon as we are led to believe. But when you go back in time and you physically see with your own eyes that this energy is seeping into him from the ground, that's meant to tell you something, I think, about what the Titan Keepers were actually aware of. And what that can tell you is one of two things. Either the Titan Keepers were not aware that this is what happened, and they exposed themselves as having experimented with Galakrond before by doing this, or they are lying about it. And they knew very well what corrupted Galakrond, and they tried to pawn it off on Yogg-Saron, saying, oh, Yogg-Saron did it. The same way that they make out everything that happens that's bad on Azeroth to be the old god's fault. But we know that's not always true, that they are definitely, the Titans are and their keepers are certainly responsible for some bad things. Keeper tier in Dawn of the Aspects, you are absolutely correct, Jay.
Thank you, Chef.
As far back as Dawn of the Aspects, which I believe was written by, was that Richard Knack? It doesn't really matter, but yeah, Tyr felt responsible for what happened to Galakrond. And I would say that there's some things about Galakrond that should stick out to you as very strange. First of all, when you get to Galakrond, he looks like he's all one color. Like his skin, his eyes, his tongue, it's all like one color. He looks like he's made of like grayish or silver material. When I first looked at Galakrond, I thought he almost looks like he's made of stone. Like, why does he look like that? And then the silver scale came to mind and I went, whoa, wait a second. Silver, like the silver scale and the silver hand, the material can house holy energies, right? We know that that's the case. The silver hand is a literal artifact of holy reverence. So we know this to be true. In some of the older, or not even older, I think it's from the like exploration books that show Galakrond. It's interesting because Galakrond in those images he has 3 eyes, which is kind of interesting. But they're gold. They're golden. You guys know, like, eyes are the windows to the soul. It's not uncommon for if someone has a particular colored eyes, especially like magical eyes, like fel eyes or arcane eyes, like, you guys know that is typically a hint at, like, maybe the essence of their soul. Eyes are the windows to the soul kind of thing. TV trope shit. Well, if that's the case, then what it suggests about Galakrond is that something very bright was within Galakrond. Galakrond should also alarm you a little bit because of his size. Galakrond is abnormally large, and maybe I'm misunderstanding predatory, like, growth, but typically you don't have something that grows to be substantially larger than everything around it, especially because once that occurs, their eating habits will, like, kill things off. Like, something that big would consume so much stuff that it would, like, eradicate entire species by itself. Galakrond is abnormally large, and I would say, like, I would use the phrase titanically large, like, really big. And I never quite understood why he was so large. So I guess what I'm suggesting is that Galakrond is either a creation of or experiment of the Titans and their keepers, most likely plated with or crafted with silver, and meant to house within it the power of light. I would think, and maybe I'm wrong, and because Iridikron is there at the end, I think that they felt as though, I think Tyr probably needed to fell Galakrond because Galakrond succumbed to a type of corruption that Tyr may not have been prepared for. So there's 2 options here. Either Galakrond had light inside of it that faded into void, and the vessel did not decay because just as it can hold holy magic, it can also house void magic. And that's why Iridikron is pulling void energy out of Galakrond, which void energy, by the way, is not typically something, and there have been exceptions like Shadowmoon Burial Grounds, but it's not typically something that's associated with necromancy, and especially not necrosis. That's typically something that is attributed to, like, death and decay more than the void directly. So it is very strange that even though we were given the impression that Galakrond was necrotic or had become diseased in some way, he does not appear to be so, and the power being removed from him before our very eyes is not that of necrotic or necromantic power. It just isn't. It's void, which I think just should tell you something about what it is. I also would suggest that there is a possibility that as silver, you know, is how they say it is in, like, fantasy and TV tropes, that it has the power to repel or absorb, you know, evil. Now, some would say that as silver takes in or, you know, basically counteracts the powers of evil, that it tarnishes, it becomes darker over time. So the reason why I think it is so important that they are potentially revealing to us that Galakrond was a dragon, or proto-drake even, made out of silver, and that he was a vessel, I think is hinting to you at Xal'atath and Elune. It is interesting that Iridikron pulled the energy that seemingly was perhaps associated with Xal'atath, or her very being, potentially, from inside of potentially a big silver dragon, and that she is looking, you know, to use this knife full of, you know, this void knife or whatever with fucking potentially N'Zoth in it, and you know, other void powers and shit like that, and we see in her eye the silhouette of, like, the moon in, like, an eclipse. It's like, whoa, wait a second. What is that saying about Elune? Well, as I've shown you guys, and I mentioned this on stream yesterday, if you go to the Elunaria section of the Antorus the Burning Throne raid, from Elunaria you can look out and see Elune and the blue child there in the distance. And Elune has this strange, almost bluish kind of purple tinge on her. And otherwise, Elune, frankly, looks silver. She's the pale lady. She looks like, physically, it could be something that is crafted out of silver. We also know that Elune has the power to cleanse evil, cleanse corruption. We've seen her do it with the nightmare. And so if Elune is a being of like purity, something related to silver, as she is absorbing or cleansing corruption, she might also be taking it unto herself, like silver does in the kind of fantasy tropey setting where as it is destroying or resisting evil, it also tarnishes as a result. So it's not like silver lasts forever or that it's like an infinite, like permanent solution. Like it can become corrupted. And I also want to say, and this might be wrong, but what happens when you consume too much silver metal? You get exposure-related effects of silver. Someone was telling me that it can cause your skin to turn a different color. That it can actually cause you to turn blue. Bluish purple. So, look at this guy. This is someone who has an excess of silver. And he is blue. What? That's interesting. Because when you see, it's a very similar situation. You see what's happening to Elune? You see what I'm talking about? So, if Elune is a moon that is crafted out of silver, and she is like a battery for like cleansing and like purity, essentially, look at the purple stuff on it. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So basically, I think that as Elune is cleansing corruption, she herself is also becoming corrupted. Which would mean that if you afflicted the dream with enough corruption, nightmare and stuff, and forced Elune to cleanse it, she is most likely having to take that energy unto herself. That may or may not be a good thing for us because we don't understand the true nature of Elune. So we don't really know what she is or where she came from. And as far as we know, shoot, Elune could be a freaking ordered old god, stuck in a big... Like, they say that Yasharaj, like, breathed in despair and exhaled fucking evil or some shit like that. And Yasharaj has been gone a very long time. Like, it's also interesting to me that they claim that Yasharaj had 7 heads, but in any of the artwork of Yasharaj, he doesn't. And I think that they attribute that to the different types of Shah that we see appear: pride, fear, doubt, anger. Like it's almost like 7 sins. I don't want to take it quite that far, but it's interesting how almost, I'm thinking now that when you divide things up, you're kind of ordering them. Not when you smash them into pieces. I mean, when you divide them up. And the fact that the Shah can manifest separately as like pride, as anger, as fear, makes me think that they may have ordered Yasharaj. And if they did, then Yasharaj could be a remaining aspect or potentially kind of the core of Elune. Now that is just like a wild theory, but like it's just a thought of like what could Elune possibly be? Because we don't really know. But I almost wonder if Elune herself, I'm okay if I'm fine, honestly, if she's like a pure being and she's like a good, benevolent thing. Like, I'm totally cool with Elune being like a good guy or even like a neutral character. I'm totally cool. Neutral would make sense. Honestly, a neutral old god would be fucking fascinating. So, like, that would be very interesting. So, yeah, I don't know. Hearing that perspective that's mind shattering to even think about, which is fitting, I guess. But just trying to make sense of why Xal'atath, why Galakrond, why Silver, why Tyr, like, why all of this? And I think that for me, it primarily comes back to, like, the discs of Norganon. I mean, Tyr had them. Yogg-Saron apparently had seen them. Like, I think Tyr, frankly, has been able to orchestrate his resurrection as a result of him reading what was on the discs of Norganon. And yes, that is to say, and I said this yesterday, I think, as well, but I'm not so sure that the discs of Norganon are just history. I think that the Titans, when you guys hear the phrase written in the stars or as foretold by the stars, I think that that could quite literally mean that, like, the Titans are not just shapers of worlds and stuff. They have the ability to kind of scrawl fate. Like, they have the ability to kind of write the way that they want things to go. Think about the primary timeline that I went through yesterday. Why is it that the Titans seek to preserve that timeline? Galakrond hinted at it, and I think it's for a couple reasons, to be honest with you. But it's because that timeline helps adhere to whatever their plans are. It's not just that this is the real timeline. All timelines are theoretically just as real. And as one event takes hold of another, timelines sputter off and fade into nothing as their potentials and possibilities are lost to the past. So I think it's like fascinating to think that, like, if the Bronze Dragons had that type of power, and that's from Aman'Thul, allegedly, what would someone like Norganon have, who has mastery over all of the different kinds of magics? And, his title is the Dream Weaver. We know that the dream is, at least I'm aware of, this is what I'm aware of right now, is basically, a template from which they are trying to perfect a vision for the world and put it into reality, like copy it into reality, kind of like what N'Zoth was going to try to do with Ny'alotha. And maybe that was a warning. Maybe not, but maybe in a sense it was a little bit of a warning from N'Zoth in hindsight, because it shows you that it is possible to take something that is theoretically not real and make it real by using forges and things like that, whether they are of Titan design or otherwise. So anyway, what if Elune is a relatively new being, not one born like the Titans or the ones from before, like the old gods? Well, Tazzy Boy, I think there's a little hint from Xal'atath that hints at that. And I think people often actually forget what word is emphasized or focused on in this sentence, but it is that when you're in the Temple of Elune, above the Tomb of Sargeras, or beneath the Tomb of Sargeras, above it, technically. When you're in there and Xal'atath notices a fragment of Elune's power kind of lingering there, well, that's the thing, Tensum. You're actually putting the wrong word inside the quotations. This is what I'm actually going to point out, is you guys all bit exactly on what I was going to say. Upstart is not in quotations. The word goddess is in quotations. So that is to say that Xal'atath would challenge more of her being a goddess than anything else. So while it is upstart is important, it is important because it does suggest, like I was obviously what we were going to say, that she is relatively new. And obviously that's relevant, but I would actually say that you guys should start thinking about why she puts the word goddess inside of quotations, and what that might imply about Elune. Is Elune not a goddess, but a god? What is Elune? Is Elune the housing for the physical body of Xal'atath? Is that why Xal'atath had to assume the body of someone else? Because she doesn't have her own? I think that it is a very high likeliness, and Xal'atath did put it in quotes. Yes, yeah, she does say the word goddess in quotations. It is written that way in the game to bring some attention to that. Yeah, I think it's interesting why they did that. So I think it should make you question the nature of Elune a little bit. What Elune is and what's Xal'atath's connection with her. Because that eclipsed moon in Xal'atath's eye is really not a good look. Not a good look. I hope to discover more about this. And let me also say that I'm not completely convinced that Galakrond is silver. I think that it's a very interesting hypothesis, but I will be willing to flex and change my opinions based on new information. So that's always going to be the case. I think sometimes when I get my most defensive and annoyed is when I'm not willing to do that, and I think that that's a flaw. So yeah. In which of the next 3 expansions do you think we will actually meet Elune? Well, there is always the possibility that that meeting does not occur. There are many players who say that they would be okay with Elune specifically being kind of that one mystery that's left unsolved, which I think is okay, but I think that a lot of us also really do want to know. And so I think that it's really hard to say. I think that the War Within and what Xal'atath is doing is really, I think, really hinting at Elune. I really do. There is a lot of stuff in the Cthulhu mythos that pertains to the moon, a light side and a dark side of the moon. There are entities that are directly associated with the moon in H.P. Lovecraft's, in his extended mythos from other authors as well, because it is not all written by Lovecraft. For example, H.P. Lovecraft actually only ever wrote 1 page of Xal'atath. A lot of people wouldn't know that, but when you look into it, H.P. Lovecraft, the story called Xal'atath is only 1 page long. And he didn't finish it, but it's the basis for a lot of other literature that was authored by dozens of other people over the last century, essentially, who, you know, have spun it, but also while staying true to the root of what Lovecraft was trying to do. There's some, I would think. I know it seems unlikely, but I kind of think that with the Emerald Dream stuff happening now, I kind of hope that we get Elune in the War Within. I kind of hope that they go through by then. But maybe, actually, no, I take that back. Midnight for sure. Yeah. I think if I had to pick one of the 3, I think Midnight. They could save it for the Last Titan. And they could make Elune as like truth or purity, something really close to Azeroth. Maybe like Azeroth's like direct or part of Azeroth, or like a fucking direct descendant of Azeroth, like her daughter or something. Because I think that would be beautiful, and Elune is really cool, and I don't necessarily want her to have to be a villain or something. But I think that given that Elune was around during the days of Kalimdor, the land of eternal starlight, back when there literally was not a sun orbiting Azeroth, you know, I think that she does have an innate connection to darkness, and that isn't necessarily a bad thing for the record, but it does just beg the question, you know, what really is the nature of Elune? Where really did she come from? And is she sentient to the point of being an entity that we will actually meet and speak with one day? I don't know. Or is Elune more of a concept in given form, which there's also nothing wrong with. So we'll see.